Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden, and this is Second Legacy, but I am not alone. I am with an OG of the YouTube world, Tim from the Military Arms Channel, and this is a brand new show. It is going to drive forward our rights, and we are going to pass the blessing of the Second Amendment along to the next generation. And with that as the mission and the focal point, Tim, my man, you have the experience. You are the OG. What do you want to talk about? And I will see if I can keep up.
Well, let's talk about McCarthy and this crazy bid for the speakership. Now, McCarthy has been through 13 votes now as of this recording, and still has come up short.
As of this one, we are at 13, the lucky 13, and it is still a clown show. You are correct.
And so they're trying to make all sorts of concessions and stuff. And what's really interesting about this battle, so the Republicans obviously lost control of the Senate in the last round of elections, and they just captured the thinnest of majorities in the House. And so they need every Republican on board to vote for the next speaker, because if they have any defectors, 4 or 5, as little as 4 or 5, that can gum up the works. And that's what we're seeing right now. Because of that thin majority, there are at least, I think, around 10 or a little more never McCarthy types. They don't want anything to do with McCarthy at all. They don't want concessions. They don't want anything. They just want a different candidate. And then you have another 10 or 11 people that are Republicans that just want concessions. They're not necessarily anti-McCarthy. They just want to change the rules of the game to their benefit, and they want McCarthy to do that. If he does it, then they're willing to vote for him. Now, what's happening hasn't happened really like this before in history. We have 2 other instances, one in 1856, just before the outbreak of the Civil War, where the 34th Congress went 133 votes deep before they elected a speaker.
So we are 10% in of the all-time record.
Right. Going for it. It looks like, because it doesn't look like he has the votes still. Now, in 1856, it went, 2 months?
2 months. Yep.
We're only a week into this whole thing, coming up on our second week. So he has a ways to go to capture the new title of the longest, battle for speakership that has ever taken place in the U.S. House.
But the first one since Prohibition.
Yes.
That's something.
So 1923, 9 rounds of votes to elect a speaker. So he's blown past that one. Now he's working on 1856. And why is that, man? What is it about McCarthy that these Republicans have a bone to pick? Now, it's not uncommon. And there's only been a handful of times where the speaker was elected unanimously by their own party. There's typically 5, 10 or so holdouts. But because the margins are so narrow right now in their majority, this is what's gumming up the works. So what's your take? What's wrong with McCarthy?
Love it. So, Tim, that's why we do this. Man, that analysis was spot on. That was incredible. You hit on so many things right there. All right. So before I answer that question, just frame it for a perspective, because what are we doing here? We're talking about the current events of everything happening in our political system, in our country, the underlying themes of what's happening, relating it back to the Second Amendment, right? Because you and I obviously have our own followings. We're in the Second Amendment world. We're deep into that. But what does that have to do with what we're looking at here with McCarthy? And then you tie in all the other questions you just asked. Why are people rejecting McCarthy? What is it, 10? Is it 20? What's going on? Is it 1933? There are so many questions, right?
Right.
So let's answer the first one first. The reason that this is so important is because this is how the entire machine works in Washington. When these gun control bills come out, think back 2 years ago. For the last 2 years, you had H.R. 8, you had H.R. 1446, you had H.R. 1808, the assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. All 3, by the way, didn't pass. Just want to toot our little horn about that one.
Yep.
But the big thing about that is none of those things would have happened if you didn't have the right gun controlling Democrats in the right legislative positions, like the speakerships, the speakership of the House, like the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, the high-waisted fiend. I mean, if you didn't have those, that's my little nickname for him. If you didn't have those people in place, they wouldn't have been able to do what they did. David Cicilline, the guy who says, I don't spare me the BS about your constitutional rights, he's not really going to garner the same power and leverage that a Jerry Nadler, i.e. high-waisted fiend, or Nancy Pelosi are going to pull, or Carolyn Maloney before she got ousted, which was also amazing. That's what's at stake here. Mm-hmm. You've got the person who's determining all the bills, all the movement, all the appointees, all the committee memberships, and all the committee chairs in the majority leader of the House, which in this case is hypothetically McCarthy. So what puts the people who are at odds with him first of all, there's two questions there. Why are they at odds with him? And what gives them the power to do this? Because make no mistake, this is about power.
Oh, it always
That's
is.
what,
Yes.
absolutely.
Politics and
So
power
dive
are
into that one.
synonymous. Yes.
Right, exactly. So you dive into that one. The reason that McCarthy is getting so much resistance is twofold. One, he was in charge of the Republican Party when they didn't take the House like they should have in this past election.
Mm-hmm.
So he's getting a little blowback on that. And as a big point of irony, because he doesn't have the margin that he should have had, he's getting more resistant because he empowered the people blocking him right now.
Right.
And so when you look at it from that perspective, it all starts to make a little bit more sense. And when you're putting someone like McCarthy, who is kind of known to side and be a little easier on the Democrats and not really a conservative for Second Amendment rights,
there you go. You're hitting on something right there. Yep. That's where a lot of these
you're going to appoint people
yes.
to positions who will not defend the Second Amendment. For example, a perfect case in point. We can segue on this. Jim Jordan just sent a letter to the ATF a month ago that said, why are you usurping the power of Congress through your Chevron deference and the Gun Control Act of 1968? You don't have the authority. I want answers. Well, if McCarthy doesn't put him in the chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, that's going nowhere.
Right. Yep. It's true. And I think that is where the holdouts, because there's two groups that are gumming up the works right now. You have the Never McCarthy group that just simply don't want anything to do with him. He's made too many concessions with the Democrats. It's the Freedom Caucus, the House Freedom Caucus, that has a real problem with him and his leadership or lack thereof. And so that's why they're Never McCarthy. They just want a completely different candidate. Then the other group within this that's being, through the national media, is being promoted as one group of holdouts. It's really two. The second group, which Chip Roy is part of the second group, all they want are the concessions. They don't have a real problem with McCarthy per se. They don't trust him, so they want some concessions. So if he does something that really rubs them the wrong way, it takes one member of the House to force a vote of no confidence. So we'll give him the speakership, but he has to change the rules. If he just upsets one of us, we can force a vote and we can kick him out if we have the votes, if he, aggravates the entire Republican caucus. And so that's what the Chip Roy group is trying to do. Then you have the Brobert group that just simply doesn't want anything to do with McCarthy. Where I stand is McCarthy is establishment rhino. I'm not a Republican as it is. I mean, in Indiana, we have to pick a party of the two parties before we can even vote in the primary. So I pick Republican, but I'm pretty much a single issue voter, which relates to the Second Amendment. And the Republican Party, if you look back through time, and I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but the Republicans have been in power when gun control is passed more often in my lifetime than Democrats. Now, it's not for lack of trying by the Democrats. They've just been frustrated. But the Republicans have passed more gun control in my life than the Democrats have. And so I don't trust them any more than I trust the Democrats when it comes to my rights.
No, that's so powerful. So that brings in two different parts there. Of course, we don't sit there and say, oh, the Republicans are in control. Nothing bad will happen. Okay, I'm going to give you a recent example. During the Trump slump, when no one was buying guns and no one was buying ammo and no one was concerned that our gun rights were going to be infringed, that's when the bump stock ban came down by a Republican president through an executive order that enforced through the ATF, which is still being litigated to this day. And now it's going to be finalized, again, probably litigated some more. The big thing that we can fall into, and this is a human thing, this isn't necessarily a Second Amendment supporter thing or a First Amendment or anything. When you feel there's no threat, you kind of go to sleep.
Yep, I've been saying that for years.
Relax.
Yep.
And that's something that we see quite frequently in our community. And because, well, the Democrats aren't in power, we defeated them. So I can go back to hanging out with football, trying to figure out the stock market, taking care of my kids, making sure my family's taken care of. I can do the things that I need to do. And then 4 years later, when they've redrawn all the districts in the House, and all of a sudden, because the districts are changed, you're now in a Democrat zone because everything changed because you didn't pay attention to the redistricting zoning that was happening in your local elections. And now the national state flips, and now you go out and buy all the guns and buy all the ammo because now there's a crunch on.
Yep.
And it's like a pendulum both ways. And I think that, kind of going back to the original point, if we stayed involved at the level that we need to stay involved for our gun rights and realize this is a long-term fight, this is for the rights of our children, not necessarily us right this second, then we will be in a better position to pass that torch of freedom along. Something I say all the time on my channel is pass the blessing of the Second Amendment along to the next generation. The reason that I say that is not because it sounds amazing, it's because the fight that we're doing is going to take time. And what they're doing in the House right now, getting back to the original point, you've got two distinct groups, like you said, and personally, my own opinion, McCarthy is also a rhino. He does whatever benefits him and his Republican Party, not necessarily Constitution or the constituents therein. But the thing that they're doing, these two groups, and it looks like that they're doing this. I haven't spoken to them, but the Chip Roys, the 10 of those guys, they are taking the reasonable position. Put a leash on McCarthy. Just make sure we have an escape valve. That's incredibly powerful. That's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Matt Gaetz, the Lauren Boeberts, I believe that they are being the aggressors to push the ball more in favor of the Chip Roys, because at the end of the day, McCarthy's the only one with above like 15 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, to think of this as they're going to stop McCarthy from being speaker forever, I think is a little optimistic.
But the longer they hold out, the more dangerous it becomes too.
Correct. They're going to play this as long as they can until the amount of power is squeezed out of that fruit, until it becomes a detriment to themselves. And at that point, they will capitulate and say, see, we pushed through the conservative ideals. Look, constituents, look at what we did. Look, we held the rhinos. We got the establishment. We stuck it to them. And to be fair, in some points, they would.
Yeah. And when I say that the longer the holdouts hold out, it becomes more dangerous. We don't know what McCarthy and his group is willing to do. There have been several nuclear options that have been discussed, right? Mm-hmm. And if they invoke a nuclear option, they're going to basically have to roll the dice that the holdouts are willing to go so far as to allow a Democrat to win the gavel, or, bend over, kiss the ring, and say, hey, McCarthy, you have our vote. Because that nuclear option is going to, if it goes that far, it could go wrong against the Republicans, and the Democrats could actually walk away with the gavel. Now, it's a long shot, but the longer they hold out, and if McCarthy wants to, hold on to those reins of power, they might push him and his group to do something that could be a little bit dangerous, and we don't know what's on the other side of it. That could really get ugly for us in terms of our legislative rights and things like that. The last thing we want is some anti-gunner to, actually get the gavel, at least for the next 2 years, right? We always have to go from election to election to election. And back to your point about people going to sleep when a Republican is in office, that is so true. That's something that I rail against all the time. We need to change the mindset. Instead of going to sleep when Republicans control things, because they're not our friends, they have to be watched just as much as the Democrats have to be watched. We need to go on the offense. When Trump won the White House in 2016, the Republicans also got the House and the Senate. What happened in the 2 years that they had power? Nothing. All the broken promises. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to fix that. All the Second Amendment promises. Nothing, especially as it relates to the Second Amendment, got done. So much missed opportunity. And that's why I have a problem with people like McCarthy, because McCarthy is straight down the middle of the road. I think that the Heritage Foundation gives him a rating of something like 88% in terms of his conservatism and how he votes.
Yeah, I think it's 88.
So he's fairly conservative, but if in my mind, because I am so conservative, he's a fence setter, and he can go either way on any issue depending on how it would politically benefit him, right? More money's to be spent in his district or whatever that might politically benefit him. He'd be willing to turn a blind eye to our Second Amendment rights. Like, well, we can talk about an assault weapons ban. Don't confiscate them, but just ban all the future sales, and I can get on board with that. I can see him doing something like that. So,
well, right, but that's what you're hitting on is what a politician does.
Right.
They look at all the pieces and all the little coins that they can play to give up a little bit on this one, a little bit on this one, and then at the end, we've achieved something that we want, and they'll call it a bipartisan compromise. You've heard it multiple times. That's what they do. The only problem is when it revolves around the Second Amendment rights or the First Amendment rights or any rights that are protected in our Bill of Rights, those aren't chips for negotiation, but that's what they use them as.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point.
It is. So it would seem that this could go on for a little while. So we're at the 13th vote and still, they haven't changed anything. I don't know how long this could go. I mean, we could all sit here and speculate, but it would seem that this could go on for several more days at minimum as they try to negotiate this out. I don't see a real problem with this whole process. This is how it's supposed to work, especially when you're talking about like the group that we've put Chip Roy into. They're just looking for concessions, and what they're doing is not unheard of. This happens every time they elect a new speaker, right? And there's always holdouts that just don't want that particular candidate. The only reason this is unique and it's playing out the way that it's playing out, again, is simply because of the thin majority that the Republicans have. They cannot have just 5 defectors. They need every single vote to get the speaker that they want. I just wish they were chosen another speaker.
And that speaks right, but that speaks to something else though. And this is getting kind of into the weeds. I know as we wrap the conversation, this, if you know anything or have any experience in corporate leadership, or if you have any type of leadership of any type, you understand that you need to get in front of problems before they rear their ugly head in public for everyone to see. Mm-hmm. For example, if McCarthy was such an amazing leader and had leadership skills that he had on lock, then he probably should have had these conversations behind closed doors over the last 2 months that they've had going into this, because they knew this was coming. They knew there was resistance. In fact, instead of actually dealing with the problem to the point where there's actually frustration, there's actually irritation, so much so that they're openly insulting each other on the floor.
Yeah.
That only comes from either ignoring someone or having them feel not heard, or completely just negating them to the closet and saying, yeah, you'll do what I tell you to because you're a Republican. He wouldn't have moved already into the speakership suite. His stuff is already in there.
I know. Pretty confident.
So right. Like, wow, you got that, Kev. But the thing that's so important is if he was an amazing leader, he would have gotten in front of that, and this would have never been allowed to happen on the floor. It would have happened behind the scenes, and they can scream and they can yell, and Matt Gaetz can say he's a Florida man, and Chip Roy can say the border sucks, and Lauren Boebert can say, like my new glasses. I don't care what she says. But the point is, this should not have happened on the floor. That's my only contention with this. I think the policy and the politics make sense. Don't air your dirty laundry like that.
No, they should show unity on the floor, because let's face it, the Democrats are sitting back, laughing, having a good time with this. You 100%. Know, even AOC made a quip just the other day. I think it was yesterday. It was kind of funny, like something about, and I'm paraphrasing, if we played a drinking game, you know, every time they hold a vote, we'd be smashed right now. I mean, I don't agree with her at all in her politics, but for somebody that's, you know, generally not all there, that was pretty funny on her part. But
no, you know what?
Right.
Good joke.
They left the door open and she stepped in it. Yep.
I love it. And then that kind of goes back to the Republicans. Guys, if you're leaving doors open where AOC can make a fool of you.
Right.
Come on now.
So true.
Like, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys, we look forward to what you might have to say about the show today and what we're talking about with regards to Leader McCarthy. Comment down below. Also take a moment to like, share, and subscribe this video. And comment, because we will read those comments and you can give us ideas for future shows. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed today's content, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.